right, I think that's my cue. We've got 4:05 Eastern time. It is other times, other places where all of you are. So thank you so much for joining us for our second official session of ShiftED. So exciting to see all of you here. We have another really great panel or session teed up for you to enjoy today. So I would really love to welcome Lisa Gottfried, who is going to be our presenter for this session. And I also want to make sure that I also introduce Alexandria Canchola, who is our community moderator for this session. So she's going to help us keep track of time and keep track of things happening in the chat and all sorts of other amazing things. So without further ado, I also just want to really quickly remind everyone that we are recording this session. I should have done this at the last one. We are going to post this up online on YouTube, on our YouTube site. So if you are uncomfortable with being recorded, please just note that we are doing that, and this is your chance to kind of nope out of that. So now, without any further ado, Lisa, please go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much. I just want to say, like, I've had every intention ever since I started teaching 9 years ago to get involved with AIGA and just never got to it. So I'm so excited to be here. And I'm like super excited to see what the educator community is about. So I'm so stoked and pumped to be connected with all of you. I think it's amazing. Also, I had some dental work done, so I'm a little black and blue here. Sorry for that. It's just doesn't hurt anymore, but it's ugly. Okay, so let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen here, and it's a little bit of I'm going to talk and a little bit of videos and a little bit of maybe demos. Let's see if I can put this in present mode here. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen in presentation mode now. So can you see that? Okay, great. So a little bit of this is about the crazy journey that all of us have been on, particularly my journey, what I was doing 2 years ago versus what I'm doing now in the classroom. And just to give you a sense of who I am, I teach at New Technology High School. I'm a digital design educator. I teach everything from very beginning intro classes in Photoshop and Illustrator, all the way up to advanced classes. And most of the kids who attend those advanced classes go on to universities and colleges like where you guys are teaching. So I'm preparing those students to be successful when they come to you. I'm also a 100 Innovator and Academy member. It's an organization based out of Helsinki, Finland. I'll tell you a little bit of that story, which was kind of a crazy thing that fell in my lap. But since 2017, I've been considered a top 100 global innovator in education for various things that I've done. And I'm going to share some of that work that has been happening over the last couple of years. And then through that, I became involved with the Adobe Education Leader group. And I'm a master teacher for Adobe, so I write curriculum for Adobe. And then on top of all that, and probably one of my most favorite jobs during the pandemic has been as a guest lecturer or an assistant professor at Touro University, teaching other teachers who are general ed teachers about how to bring design into their classrooms, which is super fun. So that's been a great experience. And then just a little bit. And feel free at any point if you want to either unmute or you want to put something in the chat. Let me pull up the chat so I have it open here. I'm okay with being interrupted at any point along the way, so don't feel like you just have to sit back and be passive. I love conversation. About the students, they're 9th through 12th graders, beginning to advanced. There's lots of reasons why kids take my class. The 9th graders are required to take a semester with me, and then a semester with a computer science teacher to prepare them for project-based learning. Our school is about 25 years old. We've been doing wall-to-wall project-based learning which is all about student voice and choice since the very beginning, since we sort of were birthed at the same time as High Tech High down in San Diego. And we've kind of run our route in different ways, but we're very much like close cousins with them. And what we do in the classroom is, at least what I do in the classroom, is mostly student-led, especially when we get up into the upper grades. Let's see if I can advance this. Okay, so let's see, quick story. The first year that I was at this was 3 or 4 years into being at New Tech, we decided that we wanted to redo our school portfolio requirements, because what was happening is that students were making portfolios that no one was looking at once they graduated from high school. And they've been doing that for 20 years. You know, they've been doing these sort of brochure websites, which were really like innovative and amazing for their time 20 years ago, where kids were writing the code and creating their own websites and learning all of those skills. But it became really clear that students were feeling like it was just a hoop that needed to be jumped through. And so we convened this group of both me and Andrew Biggs, who's there on the right, as staff members, and then a group of about, I would say, 12 students, to sort of go through the design process and look at, like, how can we revamp the portfolio process so that it's more meaningful and it gets used and seen by more people. And so we switched to a blog portfolio where students blogged on a regular basis, and then we used social media to promote their blogs. And it became everything from a way to document their learning process, to connecting with their community, to teaching others what they've learned and learning from one another. And that was really cool. And I did an interview for EdSurge, the organization EdSurge. And when the article came out, I got another call from somebody in London who also wanted to do an interview with me. And I love to talk about my work. Who doesn't? And she spent about an hour speaking with me about what we were doing. And I thought it was just another article for online. And it turns out it was for this organization called 100.org. And they'd been doing top 100 innovations in Finland for the last 2 years, and they wanted to make it global. So I didn't realize that I was actually interviewing for this highly prestigious, and you know, the people who were on the committee, like, you know, Sir Ken Robinson was on the committee, and like there were some really big power players there. And all I know is that I got an email that said, like, hey, you've been chosen as the top 100 global innovator in education. Will you come to Finland? And I had to go to my principal and say, is this real or is this a scam? Like, I don't even know who these people are. And it turns out we went to Finland, we went to Helsinki, and got this award and started to plug into this incredible international community of educators doing amazing work. So that's kind of how my time at New Tech has been just wacky that way. The first year that I was at New Tech, I managed to get Anita Hill to come speak at our school and show her documentary called Anita. Don't ask me how that happened. Stuff like this just happens to me all the time. It just drops in my lap. And then along with that happening, my principal, who was really forward thinking, I don't know how he managed to do it, but he got a bunch of people from Adobe to come into my classroom. We do tours all the time where people come into the classroom and they ask kids questions and they want to know about projects they're working on. And the guys at Adobe literally swarmed me in my classroom, had all sorts of questions for me, wanted to know, like, why am I choosing this software and how is it working with the kids? And it was really like, I was fangirling it because they're from Adobe. They were amazed at what the kids were doing in the classroom. And at the end, the team leader, Tom Wynn, who is the guy in the blue shirt jumping, I turned to him and said, hey, do you guys, I just read an article about externships. Hey, do you guys ever do externships where you like have a teacher who's like embedded on your team and like works there for a week or two? And he's like, oh, we've never done that before, but if you do the research and come back to me with some info, I'm willing to look at it. I just went to my boss and said, hey, do we have any money to send me during spring break? Just pay me, you know, like for the week's work. And, you know, do we have any grant money or anything like that? And she came back and said, yeah, we do. We'll pay you for the week. So I called Tom and said, you don't have to pay me anything. I'm coming to work for you guys. What's a good week for you? Here's when my spring break is. And they put me on a development team. I can't tell you what they were developing because it's under an NDA, but it was one of the most incredible experiences that I'd had. And it sort of underscored for me this whole idea that I was teaching my kids about project management and how to collaborate with one another. And I learned so much about how they collaborate at Adobe and brought that all back to the classroom. So this is the small team. They've since grown their team quite a bit. And a couple of these guys worked on what is now Spark, which is used a lot in education. They're no longer on that particular product team, but they were one of the like progenitors, the beginning team that started that particular product. And it was an incredible experience. So I started, you know, we're at lunch and I'm talking to Tom and I'm telling him about this crazy 100 innovation thing that we won. And he's listening to all these things that have happened to me in the classroom and things that he's like, you know, you really need to join the Adobe Education Leader team. I don't know what that is. I'm just there fangirling and having a great time, taking lots of notes, giving them information about what we do in our classroom. And all of a sudden, like, I'm on the Adobe Education Leader team. And I don't know how that happened either, but it happened. And then it turns out there's this amazing group of people who are from around the world who focus on teaching Adobe products, both in K-12 and also in post-secondary education. And so that's been an incredible group. And that's kind of why I'm so excited to be here, because I know the potential of what this group probably can do based on the connections that I've made at the Adobe Education Leaders. And through the Adobe Education Leader group, there have been all sorts of other opportunities that have come up, like I do talks. I did a talk for ISTE about innovative assessment practices and how you foster creativity that way with Tacey Trowbridge, who's the global education outreach person for Adobe. She is amazing. And I have to tell you, let's see, while I was at Adobe and while I was at the Education Leader Conference, well, it went so well at Adobe that they invited me back during the summer for an additional 2 weeks. And they said, well, we'll pay you this time. You know, you don't have to go and get money, so we'll pay you. Just come back and be on the team again. It was so invaluable. And that's when I attended the Adobe Education Summit that happens. And all of these people were there and all sorts of incredible presentations. And the one presentation, they were doing something about creative jams. I don't know if any of you guys have done creative jams at your colleges, but it's sort of like a hackathon, but it's for design, for mobile apps and things like that. And I was at the talk where they were explaining what a creative jam was, and I missed it because I was also interning or externing at the same time that I was going to the summit. So I would pop in and out of the summit and hear part of a talk and not be able to sit through the whole thing. And so I was like, oh, creative jam, that sounds a lot like, oh, awesome. Yes, creative jams are so fun. So I sort of related it to what we do at our school, which is we've done some whole school design challenges where we've imagined what school might look like in the future, or you know, we've done like 2-day design challenges where the whole school participates, before we jump into winter quarter. And so I thought, well, maybe that's what that is. So wouldn't it be cool if we could do a creative jam with all Adobe products, you know, during those 2 days. And so I went to Tacey, it's a tiny little picture, but she's here on the screen next to me. I went to Tacey, I had this crazy idea. I want to do a 1-day design challenge with the whole school. I want Adobe to sponsor us. I want, and then when we're done with whatever it is that we make during that day, we're going to put that into the Napa Lighted Art Festival and project it on a 70-foot wall. And Tacey says to me, yes, we'll give you money for that. We'll get, you know, a team of Adobe people out for that day to run workshops. It was an incredible affirmative response. It was like, yes, we will help you with this, and we'll advertise it. We'll do all these things for you. Yeah, okay. I have a crazy idea, but Adobe's saying yes to it. So that seems to be my mode of operating, is that I come up with these crazy ideas and then people gather around it and then are super excited about it and want to support it, which is so awesome. And with that, I just completed a year of the Photoshop Advisory Council, like serving on a council that was so impressive that I was kind of ashamed to be on that committee because, you know, here I am just an educator, right? We say that, but educators are so important, but power users of Photoshop, like people who work for, you know, who make movie posters for Hollywood, for Netflix, for, you know, really high end, like Peloton designers, like really high end users. And here I am, like, you know, I know enough about Photoshop to teach it to 9th graders and to teach, you know, and to let my upper level students just fly with it. It was an amazing experience. And again, I met some incredible people and incredible designers who are out there doing amazing work and have brought them into the classroom. And I hope to continue to do that. Right, those experts should never teach 9th graders the basic, exactly. So I have sort of that beginner's mindset, and also like a really unique point of view of like what's needed as they move forward with the roadmap for Photoshop. So that was really cool to be able to like have a say in where they're headed next. There's some cool things coming down the road. And then from that, they hired a group of people from the Adobe education leaders and from other groups to actually write some lesson plans using Adobe products. So I was conscripted into that. And during the pandemic, that was a lot of what I was doing during the summer. I never took time off during the pandemic. I was working like mad trying to get lesson plans done for a better lesson and for the Adobe Education Exchange. And so that was super fun to be able to take some of the things that were working in the classroom and put them into lessons that general ed teachers could grab if they needed it. And in the meantime, to go back to the Lighted Art Festival, the Napa Lighted Art Festival, the first year that it happened, I believe it was 2018. It was the first year that they put it on. The Parks and Recs guy came to me and said, we'd like your students to be involved somehow. And we kind of decided that we could maybe concentrate on doing these 20-minute countdown clocks that would happen in between the projection showings. So they were going to do like 15 buildings around downtown Napa. There was a call for proposals from artists, from international artists and local artists, to make projection art that would go on the buildings during one of the quietest times in the wine industry, which is like January. And it was really an attempt to get people into downtown Napa during like low tourist season to try to pump up the amount of visitors that were showing up, because we really do rely on tourism in the Napa Valley, obviously. And so my kids spent, I would say, like 2 months working on these countdown clocks in After Effects and in Illustrator. And we went through many iterations. We talked about like, what can a clock actually be? I love the one on the bottom with the light bulbs, because it was just every minute one of the light bulbs would shatter and just disappear until, so you knew that the show was about to start if there was only one. And so had a really fun time sort of exploring here, and the D20 die, you know, it would roll and then it would show up again as 19, and it would just keep rolling until it was down to 1. And they were super fun. And then the 2017 fires hit, and it was so destructive on both sides of the valley. We had fires up and down the valley. It was so traumatic, and businesses really suffered financially. And a lot of people said, well, we can't afford to sponsor, you know, projection artists on a building. So everything kind of fell apart. And the Park and Recs department basically didn't tell us that they weren't going to show our artwork until like the day before the show. And it was, they didn't handle it well. It was kind of, it was not cool. And so we all walked away, my students and I both, incredibly bitter about the whole thing. Like it was a total bummer. And I thought about this over the summer, and I thought, you know, this is too good of a project to let go of this. I'm going to swallow my pride and go back to the Parks and Rec people and ask them how we could fix it for next year, and like look at all the things that didn't work and try to address those ahead of time. And so what happened was they were feeling so bad about what had happened that they're like, look, we'll give you a building. We just feel so bad. We'll figure out a way to pay for it. Like, this is your building. And so the other thing they did was they gave us a mentor. So the consultants that run the whole festival, they're out of the projection studio in London, I believe, or somewhere in the UK. I'm not sure if it's in London. I think it's in London. Ross Ashton and Karen modded, and the Parks and Recs people said, we'll pay for them to actually be your mentors. So, because that was one of the biggest problems, was there was no communication between the client and the students. It was just really poor. Like our emails would go unanswered for, you know, weeks at a time. And that's why we were sort of caught short the first time. So they said, well, we'll make it a regular thing. You can meet with Karen and Ross over a video conference. Whatever time your class is at, they'll meet with you via video conference and work through this on a regular basis. So we thought, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So I took my upper level class and I said to them, like, here are all the things that I wanted to teach you this year and wanted to do, but here's what we have, this giant building that we can do whatever we want with. What do you want to do? And so having gone to Adobe and seen how they worked with their projects, I had all the students apply for different positions. So we had product managers, like people who own Photoshop and Illustrator. So somebody who owned the whole Lighted Art Festival. We had, so 2 kids owned the whole Lighted Art Festival, and then 2 students owned the Create-a-thon, the design day that we were going to do. And so we had these 2 large projects going at the same time. And that was all we did for the fall semester, were those 2 big projects. And then we also had teams. So we had team leaders or project managers. We had technical managers that if we didn't know how to accomplish something, whether it's an animation or a technical something, they would be the ones that would go do the research and bring it back to their groups and teach everybody how to do the thing that they wanted to do. And then we had creative directors, like people who had the final say on how the artwork was going to look. And I had them, you know, write up resumes, and they, instead of doing interviews, they got up and did a presentation about their strengths and weaknesses. And then I pretty much gave everybody the job that they wanted. It just kind of worked out magically that way. And then convinced a couple kids to move to different roles. And this young lady right here, Nicole, was actually, like, some of them really presented some interesting skill sets that didn't match some of the job descriptions that we had, but they matched the needs that we had. Like, we needed a COO, somebody who was in charge of operations for the Create-a-thon. And Nicole turned out to be this amazing operations person. And then the person in the blue here that with his back facing towards us, he wanted to be the documentarian of the entire process. We're like, go for it. Here's the $4,000 camera. Let's see what you got. Like, and he now owns his own film business, which is amazing. And then along the way, some of my students were invited to alpha test some product for the iPad before all the stuff came out on the iPad that Photoshop has done. Photoshop for the iPad, Illustrator for the iPad. So that was kind of cool. So we got a chance to go to the offices in San Jose and meet some of the people there. And then here in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see these are all the people who are volunteering for the Create-a-thon. So we went in and did some planning sessions at Adobe with these folks who were going to show up at our school at the beginning of the winter semester and just plan out, like, what was it going to look like, who was going to do what. And it was a great opportunity for them to recruit people from Adobe to come and help us for the Create-a-thon. So it's all happening at the same time. And then we finally, in January, the first Create-a-thon that we did, the first Lighted Art Festival, attracted, I think, like 100,000 people to the show. And then the second year, it doubled. It was like 200,000 people came to the show. And it was over a week's time. So it was pretty amazing. If you talk about PVL, you're always looking for like authentic audience members. Like, can you imagine your artwork is going to be seen by hundreds of thousands of people and it's blown up huge. So the stakes were huge for the students and it really caused great engagement for them. It was, they didn't care about the grade anymore. It was about, like, can we provide something that's worthwhile for the community? And so I wanted to show you this really quickly, was like a little snippet of what Adobe, actually, I did not share with sound here. Hold on a second. Let me do that. This was an Adobe video or a little snippet from it. Let's see if I can. Okay, let me know if, see, I messed with the sharing. So let me stop sharing for a second. I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Share, sound, alright. Let me know if the sound doesn't work.
The Create-a-thon here is a school-wide design challenge in which students are working together to create a work of art using Adobe products for the Napa Lighted Art Festival.
So each group is working on a collaboration around creating a design, and those designs will then be used to be on display at the art festival.
The fact that a lot of people might see my work, it's a really new experience. It's beyond what I know.
The world that we live in is about making something and sharing it with the rest of the world. And to be able to gather people to look and share ideas, I think is extremely crucial for any business that you go into in your life.
Students may graduate with particular technical knowledge or deep knowledge in one area, but haven't had a lot of experience working across, or really diving in deep to understand a problem, coming up with an innovative solution, and then creating it, actually bringing that to life. And the purpose of what we're trying to do is inspire and empower the next generation to be lifelong creators. Whatever they're creating today, be on a wall that's shared with 20,000 people is an incredibly exciting opportunity. And so to look at the ideas and the ways in which they're interpreting a theme and then trying to put that into practice and create a representation of that is really exciting to see.
So it was super cool because not only did we do this create-a-thon, but we also had like professional videographers that were there documenting the whole thing, and then we had students shadowing them. So, and we had students shadowing PR people that were there who were interested in going into, you know, that business. So it was, for me, it was always like, look, I'm not doing any of this work. I want the students to do everything that's there and to make all decisions and to be in charge. So when the actual create-a-thon happened, I was constantly referring people when they had questions to the students who were in charge and their teams. So it was I cried the first time I saw the artwork on the building. It was like the pinnacle of my career. I like just mind blowing. And then we did it again the next year. And my question was always like, how do we top that? I'm gonna talk a little bit about that too. So we topped it the next year. Let's see. Okay, so for the work that we did, we actually won the National Best in Network for New Tech Network, which is a network of about 200 schools across the country. So we submitted our projects and we won Best in Network, and my kids got to be keynote speakers at the conference. So they talked to like 1,500 educators from around the country, which was super cool. Diane, you have a friend, Amy, in Napa. Awesome. That is so awesome. So it was really, the kids that got chosen had to actually get up in front of my class and like explain why they should be the one chosen to go to Florida and do this presentation from California. And then the whole class voted on who would go and gave them feedback on their presentation. So it was like they were really representing the whole class, which was pretty powerful stuff. Can you imagine like you're a teenager? So the first year that we did this, we brought in, because it wasn't enough to have, you know, Adobe folks there, we also brought in 3rd and 4th grade kids who participated and were on the teams with the kids, with the older kids. So they brought their iPads and they documented the day, and then they got to give their input on the kind of artwork that was going to be made in each one of their teams. And actually that astronaut basketball player was the work of a 9th grader and a 4th grader together. And it was the 4th grader whose idea was to give the astronaut the basketball. So I just, so incredible. And the cool thing is you didn't have to be a designer in order to participate in the day. It was just everybody experiencing Adobe products in some form or another. And yes, a lot of those students did move on to to continue in my upper level class. And then some of them came back because it was so amazing. The first year they took my class again because they wanted to be leaders. And so we sort of had this pipeline going until COVID started and kind of bummed me out. So the second year we thought, okay, well, how can we involve more students? So we recruited other schools who wanted to participate in our create-a-thon in January and said, we'll get you going on your own create-a-thon. We have all the curriculum online because all the students developed the curriculum, all the directions on what you need to do, all the presentations, and then you can participate at the same time that we're working in our school. So we had a roving iPad that went around, and we just had a Zoom, we just zoomed in, and actually you can see like Matt Dombrowski was there with us for the second year, who's going to be giving a talk on Friday for you guys with Limitless Solutions. We had Hector Grimaldo from Vietnam. I really pulled some of my contacts through 100 in. And I also pulled in some of my contacts from Adobe education leaders. So we had Robin Ray's class participate down in LA. We had Nitro High School in Florida. We had Diane Ehrlich at the George Brown College of Design, Architecture and Design. So we had both college and high school level students doing the Create-a-thon together, which was pretty darn amazing. And yes, because of that, we were recognized again with 100, and Lisa put the link into 100.org. And there were two ways to get involved. We actually asked students from around the world to submit their own line artwork, and then we would, make that into an animated neon thing. So we had artwork from Switzerland and Canada and Finland and just all over the place, Argentina, of kids of every age that were sending their cute little designs in. And then we would adapt it into the artwork that would go at the end of our Lighted Art Festival project. And then we also did the live stream and tried to get as many people as possible involved with the live stream. I just kept like, well, why don't we do this? And why don't we do that? And people kept saying yes to me. So this second year, these are some of the countries that were a part of this. I believe there's got to be more than what's here. We just haven't updated the map. And instead of getting the recognition for the log portfolios, we submitted our global Create-a-thon to the 100 organization, and we were chosen in the 2020 collection for top 100 global innovations again, but for the global Create-a-thon. So that to me was super exciting. If you you could certainly look us up and watch some of the videos about it. Some of the students wrote testimonials for 100 about what it was like. Kids who wanted to go into some kind of writing career really stepped up to the plate and wrote some pieces for 100. So they're published authors, which was kind of exciting. And then COVID hit, and I've made some connections, and I was trying to keep the connections with the folks that I knew around the world. And so we tried doing some really dumbed down sharing. Like I have a friend who teaches design, digital design in Argentina. And we figured out that we, because we're all on Zoom now because of the pandemic, that we could get the students together on video conference and get to meet each other, and then like give each other selfies, like do a selfie trade, and then do like a digital version, a piece of artwork. We, because of the pandemic, we could not use our lab computers because we were virtual, and because we were worried that for those kids who were in person, that we didn't know yet that really transmission doesn't really happen on surfaces, but we didn't know that at the time, and there was no way to clean every computer in between every class. And so I managed to get, there was a fairly large amount of grant money that needed to be spent like this year, and I asked for iPads for all of my students and managed to get iPads for all my upper level kids, not my 9th graders, but that's another story. And so we were just trying to figure out, what can you do on the iPad? And so we did these selfie trades with the kids in Argentina, which was, it was fun, and it kept students' spirits up during a really difficult time. And then we tried to figure out, how could we still do the global Create-a-thon, even if it's like an online venture? So we spent some time brainstorming and developing a website for it with design challenges. And we put the kids into teams, and the teams were the ones that decided like what kinds of design challenges they were going to do. And we got as far as this. And then it just became really clear that there was just no energy around it. It was like pulling teeth. Working with teenagers online has been one of the most challenging things. And I don't know what you guys have had in terms of experience with your students in college. Yeah, I would assume it's pretty similar. All of a sudden, all of those amazing things like came to a screeching halt. And all of that expansive thinking went out the window. It was like we couldn't even, we went through the process of hiring product managers and project managers. Everybody went through the process of writing resumes, and then just as we continued on through the project, it became really clear that this just wasn't going to happen. and all of those tools that we used in a lab to do motion graphics were not available on iPads at the time. That stuff is starting to come online now, but it was like, here you do this lighted art, and the lighted art festival was canceled because of COVID. So how are we even going to show work if we were going to continue collecting work globally from other people? We had no stage upon which that we could show the work. And so, okay, so now we have no computer lab and no creative cloud on the laptops, because most of my students have Chromebooks, and we have iPads. So I have another video that I want to show you guys that we did for we were trying to get an award for the the California Student Media Awards. And so this was our little video that I made for them. So this was the problem in my classroom. How do you teach digital design or learn digital design if you can't use the computers in the classroom due to COVID safety? We were lucky enough to get a grant for iPads for all of my upper level digital design lab students. So we had a road ahead of us to learn how to use them. What I noticed is that I felt a lot better when I was able to go for walks outside, even while we were sheltering in place. So I felt it was really important that we concentrate on nature and getting the students out in nature, especially because they had portable iPads to use. And thus began an entire year of nature journaling and projects that were based in nature so that we could learn from the best designer on the planet, Mother Nature. We started with really loose assignments. Just get out in nature and draw whatever appeals to you, experimenting with the brushes that you could use on the iPad. Students recorded questions that came up while they were observing their objects in nature. They observed vein structures in leaves, noting details on larger objects, looking at the structure of trees and how you paint them, having fun with live action brushes like watercolor and oil paints on the iPad, and simply recording the moments where they got a chance to get outside. Often we were stuck inside due to fire and smoke, and so we recorded the air quality index and other metadata. Students also had the opportunity to process some of their feelings around the traumatic events that were happening out in the world. It gave us a chance to go on a refrigerator safari and explore the plants and animals that were right in our home. We explored nature from every angle, including writing, song, drawing, photography, and more. Students explored graphic design and really interesting font choices. They began using many different apps all at once, including Adobe Fresco, Photoshop, and Illustrator. The iPads presented really interesting ways into nature through the Apple Pencil and being able to draw freehand, which was very different than using the mouse. In Illustrator, we use the shape builder tools and other iconography tools in order to build phonology wheels that we use to communicate the weather that happened over the course of the whole month of February. The students chose a color palette for their phonology wheels based on something that they had seen and captured in nature. And because we were stuck indoors, we explored live webcams and watched animals live all around the world. And then used our design skills to create posters that promoted each one of the webcams that we found. We even got to see a hummingbird hatch from its egg live. In the end, I think the students really enjoyed their learning. It was a bright spot for them in a really difficult year, and it was the same for me as well as their teacher. So, quite a difference between what we've been doing prior as to what we could do next. So I really felt like, okay, that was our big out breath, and it's okay to take an in breath. It's okay to pull in really, really close and just give ourselves permission to take care of themselves. And it was also because we've never used the iPads and the interface was different. So knowing what buttons to push, we really just needed to play. You know, it was great for social emotional learning. And it was really interesting to see some design students really have a hard time with this because of pens in the hand as opposed to a mouse. And so we had to work through some drawing trauma as well, which I thought was really interesting. And I let them do like a combination of things. Like this California Live Oak thing is actually a photograph that was then brought into Fresco, used the watercolor brush on it. First it was done in Photoshop to lift that acorn off the page, and then brought into Fresco. And I'm hoping if we have some time and you want to see a demo on that, that we could do that today. Some more examples of artwork. Yeah, Procreate is an amazing tool as well. I think Fresco is it's up and coming. You know, at first when it came on the scene, it was like all the Procreate users poo-pooed it, but there's some things that are coming that I don't think Procreate actually can do. So I think it'll be interesting. And most users who use Fresco also use Procreate. Let's see. And then I just attended a conference. It was a week-long conference on nature journaling. And so for me, somebody who's like a motion graphics person and a video person, I don't know a lot about drawing. And so for me, it's been an amazing experience. And you can see the vast differences between student artwork. Let's see if I can go backwards here. Between the student who did this little spongy twig thing, and then the student who clearly has quite a bit of drawing experience who did the snake. And I have to actually brag, that's my daughter. She actually uses Procreate. So she's been on her iPad quite a bit doing drawing already. Let's see. And then, you know, all those kids who actually were into drawing really enjoyed this. And then the ones who didn't have experience in drawing, it was really about letting go and letting them experiment with some special effects like this leaf painting, and really looking at structures, like how are trees structured? What do the branches actually look like? Looking and seeing, you know, and developing that hand-eye coordination was like a totally different thing that I've never done in my class before. So it became like about fine art, but also about graphic design. So we messed around with different typography. And for those of you who might be interested in this whole idea of nature journaling, because I believe, I really do believe that if we want students to care about the world and the future of the world, and instead of just fretting about the future of our world, to actually establish a relationship with nature, I think it's so much more empowering if we can sort of push them to look away from the computers every once in a while and really like get out in nature and have a real relationship with it. So that means, I mean, I'm just amazed at the lack of connection between students and their, just the world that's outside their window. They just don't even know to look up. And so it's been a really interesting experience for me to really push them. And then here's some other ways that you can do it, is like you can teach all sorts of graphic design principles like infographics and writing and combinations of writing and drawing. Basically, nature journaling is just using words, numbers, and pictures to observe the world around you. That's it. It's that easy. So you could sort of bring in any kind of graphic design elements. These are all hand drawn, but it is sort of getting you visually thinking about how do I communicate an idea. And even here, like I love this idea. This is a woman who made a visual representation of the sounds that she was hearing at sunset. What an amazing activity. How would you visually represent what you're hearing? It's such an interesting thing. And I think she's pretty successful here. And what they say is journaling is not really about making pretty pictures. For us as graphic designers, that's a really hard pill to swallow because everything we do, we want it to be pretty. But journaling is really about just being in the joyful moment. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be able to make pretty pictures. It means that you can use anything at your disposal to remember that moment, to enter that moment, to be present. And I think that's something that we're sorely lacking right now. And especially with the pandemic, with students who went further and further into their screens. It was a lot to ask of them to actually stop for a minute and observe what's around them. And this I just saw was today on the Nature Journal Club. Oh my gosh, like how could we as designers not use nature as a means of inspiring? Look at that. Like just such mind-blowing things that are out there in the world that we could learn from. The milkweed seed, amazing. And then even the idea of revisiting the same square foot every day or every week or once a month and seeing how things change over time. I know that for me, it's really helped me to feel more grounded and in the world. And I have to say that being a teenager and a young adult right now, like I have a 15-year-old daughter the one who drew the snake, who is super sensitive, and she's worried that the world is going to end in 20 years. Honestly, like she thinks about it all the time. And she's not the only one. So I think that it's almost like an intervention. Is what I feel like nature journaling is, to remind kids that all is not lost and that nature can teach us. And so my final project for this year was really, really simple. It was just to have them go out for 20 minutes without their phones and to just be in nature. And when they were done, they had to answer 3 questions. They had to answer, what did I observe? What am I grateful for now? And what has nature taught me? And that was their final exam. So I made it a lot of points just to make sure, because a lot of people, like a lot of kids opted out of doing the nature journaling. They just didn't do it. And the kids who did it really enjoyed it, but the final, I made it so that they really couldn't opt out of it because they couldn't pass the class if they didn't do it. So, and then I copied all their responses. So being able to observe my surroundings and admire its natural beauty is a gift that I myself take for granted in my everyday life. But actually sitting down and taking a break from it grounded me down to reality and reminded me of the gift that is just living. We're talking about kids who are depressed, that are anxious, who are writing me these responses. Every single kid did the same thing. They loved it. They'd never been away from their cell phone for 20 minutes for that long. So they'd never been away from their cell phone for that long. And that they walked away feeling empowered, calmer, at peace, more confident. Every single kid who answered these questions said the same exact thing. Nature taught me that it's okay to be myself and take my time. The fact that we live on a planet with systems that keep people alive, as well as animals and plants, is really amazing. So it got them out of this like doomsday mindset and into something where it was like both they were taking care of themselves and they were realizing that actually the world is okay and that they're going to be okay and that this actually matters to them. And I think, you know, they're so disconnected with, you know, all the gaming that they do, all the social media that they do. To ask them to put their phones away for that short amount of time, like I'm telling you, they've never done it before. They've never been out in nature just for the sake of sitting there and doing nothing. That to me is like so depressing and so empowering and hopeful at the same time. And so if you're interested at all in doing this with your students, it's a great like year-long project or semester-long project, or like if you've got a quarter or it's a short unit, it's a great like ongoing practice to do while you're also developing your design principles and design thinking and visual thinking. Because there's so much that we can learn. If you're interested at all, the Wild Wonder Conference was just a couple weeks ago. There are video passes now that you can actually go back and watch. And there are amazing tutorials and things like that. And my goal is that when I went to the Wild Wonder Conference, my goal was to see if I could go to each one of the tutorials that were happening, the workshops that were happening. And they were mostly doing like watercolors on real watercolors on paint, on paper, or they were doing like wash painting on paper and all these techniques, penciling on paper. My goal was to figure out how can I do those same things on my iPad? And can I accomplish those same things? And it turns out that actually I can. And so I wanted to show you really quickly, and yes, please, any questions? I'm almost done, and then maybe we can have a discussion about what you guys think about all of this. But I want to show you really quickly some of the things that I did while I was at the Wild Wonder conference, you can see like all of the things that I've done are on Adobe Fresco. So when there was a water soluble ink tutorial, I was like, okay, how would I do that on Fresco? You can do it. So cross hatching and adding water on top to make the ink bleed, you can do all that stuff. Thinking about diagrams and infographics, even things like lettering, like teaching ligatures and space savers and tracking and leading and all that stuff can be done with nature journaling, which I thought was super fun. I've never painted in my life. I took this gouache tutorial workshop. It's not a yellow-bellied woodpecker, it's actually a red-bellied woodpecker. And I actually had quite a bit of success. And you know what I love about it is the undo button. So even writing poetry, looking at a leaf, I was able to do some watercolor mixing. That's all done digitally. I just imported in a picture of a watercolor piece of paper and then used the live action brushes in Fresco to mix the paints. And then like, holy moly, I can draw. Like I don't come from, I do have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, but it's in ceramics and sculpture. So I don't really come from a drawing background. And that was all done with colored pencil on my iPad. So you can see like 30-second scrolls, just tonal paper. And I love this idea of if you're starting to get negative about making art, diffuse that energy by switching to labeling. Like there's such a supportive community in the nature journaling community that everybody's okay wherever they're at in their process, in their art process. So just something that I think was highly successful. And what I'm going to do next year, those first couple of weeks that you start into school, not everybody has their Adobe accounts and may not have their computers yet or whatever it is. So we're going to actually make our own zines out of just plain old paper and then go out with pens and pencils for the first couple of weeks of school and just start making our own. And I just wanted to show you like different examples of artwork. Like we were just doing brushes and things like that, but this is actually done in Fresco as well. Very graphic, very fun, done with Adobe Capture to make these really cool paintbrushes with textures and things like that. And then you can see like we did an exquisite corpse with the Adobe Education computers this year. So that like the variety of and kinds of artwork that can be made on the iPad are pretty varied. And this year, just as we're going to try to build some momentum back up with the Lighted Art Festival, we're going to try to do some augmented reality because it's really cheap. It doesn't really cost anything. So Parks and Rec has said that they'll give us a couple alleyways downtown to do some animations on the walls. And you just need to have the app to do it. It's really kind of cool. So we're going to work on that this year. And then the Lighted Art Festival is coming back in 2023. So hopefully we'll be able to like reach out to all of you folks, not for this coming school year, but the next school year to do something again collaborative. So in the vein of, I use Adobe Aero for my augmented reality. And again, like all of these apps are still kind of in their infancy stages, but you can, they're talking about putting motion into Adobe Fresco by the time Adobe Max comes out. So it means that you can do some motion graphics right in Fresco and then export it and import it right into Adobe Aero. And then you'll be able to put it wherever you want, on the floor, on the walls, wherever. So again, it's all being developed. So in the vein of how nature journaling works, there's 3 questions that you usually ask when you're nature journaling. What did you notice? What do you wonder? And what does all this remind you of? So I'm interested in hearing from you guys. What is it that you wonder? What did you notice? What does it remind you of? What's it awakening in you guys? And then really quickly, here's my contact information. If any of you guys are interested in collaborating with me, this is how I can be reached. And also on the Adobe Education Exchange. Some of my lessons are on there. And then you can always get a hold of me on Facebook. I can't handle more than one social media account at a time. So I've decided to just stick with Facebook. But that's my contact information. And I'm super, super grateful that you were here to listen and participate.
We have a question from Gary in the chat. He wanted to know if the iPad grant didn't come through, do you think the students would have engaged at this level with just paper and pens? I guess, like, how would you have,
Yeah. I think you can definitely do design principles and you can talk about use of space. There's some great stuff with nature journaling around how you lay out the page. What are some of the, basic things that you can do using squares behind things and circles behind things, and use of fonts and use of color. So I think you could. We never had to wind up doing that. I think my 9th graders that did not have access to the iPads really struggled. I had to find like free apps that we could use, like Photopia and Vector, and really work the way they were supposed to, but I could at least do some basic design principles with them. Good question.
I have a question. I hope you don't mind me asking while people bring in some questions. I'm teaching a digital illustration class right now with iPads. And so we went over to the local museum and I had students, let's pick a spot, let's draw this architecture and really like immerse yourself in the space. And I started noticing so many of them were so concerned with perfection. And I was curious if other people were feeling this. I had a few exercises that, I had them work through to kind of break away from that, but I was wondering if you could maybe share, how did you deal with this idea that they needed it to capture it perfectly?
Right. The cool thing about nature journaling is they always say it's not about the pretty pictures. It's about the joy of the moment. And you just have to keep saying that over and over again. It's not about the pretty pictures at all. It's about observing. It's about the process. And I think, again, like, it's like math trauma in school. There is drawing trauma. And even students who like are design students have sort of avoided drawing. I've avoided it for 51 years, right? And I'm only now willing to look at it because of the undo button, I think, honestly. But you have to have those conversations. I've had some amazing design students who just would not turn work in, and we finally had to say, like, what's going on with you? Is there something in your past that like somebody told you couldn't draw? And they were like, yeah. And they remembered it. And then we talked through it. And and the question is always like, what do you need support wise from us in class? And generally the answer is, well, just realizing I have it, I think, might be the first step here. Yeah.
We have a question from Victor Davila. He's asking, did the work of the students change after the class? And if so, how did they apply what they learned in your class to their other work?
There was no other work. It was just that, honestly. We did work in Illustrator on the iPad and Photoshop on the iPad. And we were just learning, honestly. Like, even my 12th graders who've been with me for 4 years, we had to sort of like all be beginners again. So it looked like beginner work on some levels. And on other levels, like they had some design sense already about them. So they definitely brought that to each one of these apps. You could tell the students who really cared about it. And of course, there were like a good portion of kids who just struggled just to show up and be in class and do work, just like everybody else. Yeah. So,
This is
so
a
I
good
can't
question.
compare. It'll be interesting, like when we go back, like because we'll have both. We'll have a laptop and we'll have the iPads. So it'll be really interesting to see like how does that play out.
There was another great question. I'm super curious, but how do you grade such work? What is good, so-so? Is it all about the process?
In nature journaling, it's all about like, did you just do what I asked of you? Did you follow the directions and did you engage? Because that's all I could do during the pandemic. I can't grade the kid on, you know, things that I'm not actually able to teach at the moment. Like I did a couple of drawing lessons, like here's how you draw a leaf, you know, here's how you draw a leaf if you're comfortable doing a contour by yourself. Here's how you draw a leaf if you just want to trace it. I mean, it was like the gamut of abilities in terms of drawing. So it became like, yeah, like who engaged in the process. And you could clearly see kids who had no fine motor skills at all. So their grade was not affected by that. It just wouldn't be fair if they like had an IEP and didn't have those fine motor skills. So like, how can we work around that? What effect tools can you use? Like, you got this incredibly powerful tool right in front of you. Like, what can we use in it that would empower you? The fridge safari is really fun. You basically just go find a piece of fruit or a piece of vegetable and you bring it back and you sort of do these observations. I noticed that this is red, that it's shiny on this end, that it's bulbous over here, that there's hair on the stem. You sort of like talk out all your observations and then sketch it and then wonder about it. I wonder who grew this. I wonder, you know, what growing conditions it needed. I wonder how long the growing season was. I wonder how this one tastes. You know, all of these sort of questions that we come up with. What does this pepper think when it's sitting in a dark fridge? You know, both scientific questions and more poetic questions too. They're super fun.
Diane has their hand up. Diane?
Hey, so I just have a question. Okay, so one, you were teaching, you have a teenage daughter. How did you stay so focused and you can always say rooster, that's the safe word in my mind. So you can just say rooster and move on, but how did you stay so positive and then just keep going? Because it was a struggle for me at times, just when they wouldn't respond, right? Can you just talk a little bit about your journey as the teacher?
I think I didn't let anybody hide. So I would call on individual people all the time. So they never knew when they were going to be called on. I tried to create some kind of community where they talk to one another. I mean, it's so demoralizing when nobody will turn on my upper level class. They all had their cameras on. They wanted to collaborate with one another. They've been through 4 years of learning together. They wanted the collaboration. 9th graders were a mess. It was absolutely impossible. It was, yeah, there were times where I just wanted to cry. And that's why I would go outside and try to take solace in nature, because it was such a horrible year. Victor.
Sorry, I figured it'd be easier to just ask the question as opposed to type it, but I love seeing your students' works, and I think both projects that you presented, the light one and the nature one, are amazing. But there seems to be like an underlying secondary topic that you kind of covered at the beginning, and you kind of just mentioned that things just fall into your lap, but I don't necessarily believe that so much, because it seems that you have this knack for finding and taking advantage of opportunities, as opposed to just like, oh, so and so, Adobe just called me, they had my phone number, and so and that's probably like another talk. I mean, Adobe could have your phone number.
Yeah.
But do you have any kind of like advice for the group as to the possibility of how to find these opportunities and connect with these
Okay, so
companies?
here's a good example. My 9th graders were doing an identity project. This was before the pandemic. And we were looking at skin tones and hex numbers. And what does it mean to be defined by your hex number? And there's a fabulous woman who does, oh my gosh, what's the name of the project? She does these portraits of people behind their Pantone color. I know that some of you guys know who this is. I can't think of her name right now. Anybody know who that is? Oh my gosh, lovely photographer. She does a TED Talk about skin tones, and she's got this project where she has giant pictures of people installed in public places with their Pantone colors behind them. And you can group them different ways. Like you can see that like 4 people with the same, and Angelica does. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. And you can see how like people with the same Pantone color have completely different facial structures, and like there's really interesting things that can be learned about that. So I reached out to her and I said, Angelica, I saw your TED Talk. I love your work. Will you come talk to the kids? Of course, I would love to come talk to the kids. So she just, you know, got on a Zoom call and like presented to the kids. She was in Berlin and we were in Napa, and the kids got to ask her questions, and we watched her TED Talk ahead of time. Like those are the kinds of things. Everybody likes to help an educator. Everybody. So like reach out to people that you never thought you could ever talk to. We've had like incredible graphic designers, a guy by the name of Tammy Coker, who's on the Photoshop Advisory Council with me, who's done stuff for I think it's the NBA. He's done stuff with Peloton. He's done stuff. He's amazing. And he came and spoke to my kids because he loves teachers. So, you know.
There's a question from Sam Cabrera. What support or resources do you wish teachers in K through 12 had from the professional and higher ed community? It's a really good question.
I would love a way to connect. Like I would love to have all of you come speak to my students about what's expected in college. I do that often actually, is reach up to my post-secondary friends and say, can you just come talk about like, how do they prepare for college if they want to be a graphic designer, and what does portfolio need to look like, and you know, like how do you know which school you should attend and things like that. I think that would be super fabulous. And then I guess my question to you guys is like, what should high schoolers know before they do you? And that's a whole other conversation in and of itself. But if you have any great suggestions, that like I'm always looking for information for my advisory board. Hi Diane, it was nice to meet you.
So we have a few minutes left if there are any last questions. I know we had one come in from Lisa about whether or not the students were able to share their work with each other and, you know, see what other people were working on.
It was really hard during the pandemic. I think like it was good that we worked with kids from Argentina because there was some exotic bit about it, and so they got to see their work and they got to have their work seen. So that was kind of fun. And because it's their face, you know, teenagers love to see themselves, but not themselves the way they are, like cartoonized. So that kind of kept them engaged. I think the conversation that impacts the most is definitely 11th and 12th graders. 9th graders aren't ready for that. We're just kind of getting them, like, here's how you succeed in high school. That's the conversation that we're having with them. Because they're really like still middle schoolers until 10th grade. They're really not ready for high school until then. You're welcome, Sam. Yeah, so reach out to me if you want to collaborate. And I think Victor's question about like this stuff doesn't fall in my lap, but like I just wake up with crazy ideas. And then I go talk to people about my crazy ideas. And I always think to myself, like, who would be supportive of this? I'm gonna knock on their door and be like, hey, I have a crazy idea. Do you want to help? And they always say yes. as long as you're like, it's not always about taking, it's like, what can I do for you? So with Angelica, it was like, Angelica, what is it that you need? Like, what can my students bring to your table that would be of benefit to you? Because I don't like to just take from people. Just always being in service, I think, helps stuff fall into my lap. Andrea wakes up with brilliant ideas. I think I'm sharing them with the wrong people. Pragmatic husband. Yeah, don't share them with the pragmatic husband. I mean, yeah, share with him, take his feedback, and then just go anyway. Trust you're crazy. Exactly. Yes. And I would say, like, find movers and shakers that you know can make stuff happen.
Lisa, could you share your email address again in the chat? Elia was asking, but I'm sure other people would like to just grab it really quick so that they can email you later.
There it is. Oh, and I definitely want to get with California College of the Arts. So yes, we need to talk, David, definitely. I think, yeah, there's some local colleges that we need, that definitely I need to start sending my students, like, did you know this is in your backyard? And I'm really bad about that. So yes, all you folks in higher ed, we love you. Thank you so much for the time and for listening. And it helps me to sort of revisit this, to remember like where the successes were, because it has been such an awful year. And one big hug to all of you who have been hybrid teaching and mask teaching and all the things that we've had to go through. It's not over yet, so we need each other.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. That was an amazing talk. And thank you so much, Alexandria, for doing a great job with the moderating and the questions. Thank you, all of you, for attending. So lovely to see you here on what is a early evening here on the East Coast, and I think various other times where you all are. That officially concludes our official second session of ShiftED for the first day. Please do join us if you are able in about an hour and a half for our social mixer hosted by myself and the amazing Alberto Regal. Just come, chat, hang out, bring a drink, whatever you want to do. And we'll just kind of spend some time together this evening for me, but other times for all of you. And then be sure to join us tomorrow, starting at 9:30 a.m. EDT time, because we're going to have a really great session, and then we've got a jam-packed day. So come join us again tomorrow. And if you have any questions, ask them in the chat. And otherwise, hopefully see you all very soon.